You wake up when your body is ready. No alarm, no phone dragging you out of a dream by the collar. The light comes in slow, the air is cool, and for a long moment there is nowhere you have to be. For roughly 300,000 years, this was not a luxury. This was an ordinary morning. For almost the entire span of being human, your ancestors woke with the sun and owed the start of their day to no one. There was no clock to obey, there was no shift to clock into. And yet the work still got done, the camp still ate, and the whole thing took far less of the day than you would ever guess. So what did they actually do all day? The honest answer is one that took anthropologists decades to believe. Anthropology is just the study of human societies and how people actually live. And for a long time, the people who studied it assumed that life before farming was a grind. Constant hunger, endless effort, a desperate scramble from one meal to the next. Then somebody decided to stop guessing and start counting. In 1963, a young researcher named Richard Lee went to the Kalahari Desert in southern Africa. He went to live among the Juhansi, sometimes called the Kung, one of the last groups on Earth still living mostly by foraging. Foraging just means finding wild food instead of farming it, gathering plants, hunting animals, taking what the land already offers. Lee did something almost no one had bothered to do. He timed it. He followed people through their days and counted the actual hours they spent getting food. The number stunned him. Roughly 15 to 20 hours a week. Not a day, a week. Read that again, because it rearranges everything you assume about progress. The people supposedly trapped in a brutal struggle for survival were spending about 2 to 3 hours a day feeding themselves. The rest of the time was theirs. A few years earlier, an anthropologist named Marshall Solins had given this idea a name that sounded almost like a contradiction. He called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society. His point was sharp. They were not rich because they owned a lot. They were rich because they wanted little, and what little they wanted, the world handed them without much fuss. Decades later, an anthropologist named James Sussman went and lived with the same Juhansi people for years. He came back saying the same thing, only with more detail. Their economy was built on the quiet confidence that the land would provide tomorrow what it provided today. So they did not hoard. They did not overwork. They did not store up for a winter of the soul that never came. But maybe you are wondering if this was a fluke, one unusually generous patch of desert. So let's go somewhere else. In Tanzania, in East Africa, live the hadza, another group who still hunt and gather. A researcher named Herman Poncer wanted to measure something specific. How many calories does a hadza body actually burn in a day? Walking miles, digging tubers, climbing for honey. He measured it directly. And the result was strange. The hadza, moving constantly across rough country, burned about the same number of calories per day as an office worker sitting in a chair in a city. The body, it turns out, has a budget. It spends roughly what it has, whether you run all day or sit all day. Which means the ancient image of the lean, exhausted forager scraping out a living was, in large part, a story we told ourselves. So let's reconstruct a real day. You wake at dawn. There is no rush, because there is nowhere urgent to be. The camp stirs slowly. Someone rekindles last night's fire. Children wake on their own and drift outside. By mid-morning, a few people head out to gather. They know exactly where the ripe plants are, because they have walked this land their entire lives. Among the Juhansi, much of the diet came from a single reliable nut, the mongongo, which lay scattered on the ground by the thousands. Gathering it took skill, not suffering. A few hours of work could bring back enough food to feed several people for days. Meanwhile, some of the men go hunting, and here is a detail that surprises everyone. Hunting often failed. A hunter might track an animal for hours and come home with nothing. Meat was a prize, not a guarantee. Most of the steady, dependable calories came from the gatherers, from the plants, from the patient knowledge of the women and elders who knew the land like a memory. By the heat of the afternoon, the food is secured. And then comes the part of the day that history forgot to record. Nothing. People rest in the shade. They repair tools. They braid. They carve. They talk. They nap. Toddlers tumble over sleeping adults. Older children roam in loose, mixed-age packs, learning to track and dig and read the weather, not from a lesson, but from play. No one is teaching them in a classroom. They are simply living near adults who know things, and absorbing it the way you once absorbed your first language, without trying. And then the sun goes down, and something shifts. An anthropologist named Polly Weissner noticed it and decided to study it carefully. She recorded the conversations of the Juhansi and sorted them by when they happened. The talk during the day, she found, was practical and a little tense. Who did what? Who owed whom? Land, food, complaints, gossip, the small frictions of people living close together. But at night, around the fire, the talk changed completely. Almost no business, almost no arguing. Instead, stories, long ones, tales of distant relatives and far-off places, myths, the spirits, the imagination set loose in the dark. Weissner argued that firelight did not just push back the night, it opened a second kind of human mind, one with room for wonder, for memory, for the binding of strangers into kin through shared story. This was the day. Modest hours of food getting, long hours of rest, craft, and company, and nights given over to the oldest entertainment there is, each other. Now, here is the twist that should bother you a little. If foraging life left so much free time, why did humans ever give it up? Why farm at all? About 10 to 12,000 years ago, our species began to settle down and plant crops. We usually call this progress, the dawn of civilization. But when scientists examined the skeletons from this transition, they found something dark. Early farmers were often shorter than the foragers who came before them. They had more cavities, more signs of disease, more worn and stressed bones. Their diets narrowed down to a few starchy crops, and their hours of work, far from shrinking, exploded. Farming fed more mouths. But it worked each body harder, fed it worse, and chained it to a single patch of dirt that demanded attention every single day. One researcher, Jared Diamond, went so far as to call agriculture the worst mistake in the history of the human race. That may be too strong, but the pattern is real. We did not invent farming because it made life easier. We invented it, and then there were simply too many of us to ever go back. So the leisure was not laziness. It was the natural rhythm of a species that had everything it needed within a half-day's walk, and the wisdom to stop working once it did. Now look at your own day. You wake to an alarm. You move through a schedule someone else mostly built. 40 hours of work, if you are lucky enough to stop at 40, plus the commute, plus the second invisible shift of emails after dinner, errands on the weekend, and a phone in your pocket that never fully lets you clock out. You produce more in a week than your ancestors produced in a season. You can summon food without hunting and light without fire. And still, somehow, you feel as though there is never enough time. Your forager ancestor worked perhaps 15 hours a week and considered the rest of life simply life. You work far more, own far more, and quietly wonder where the hours went. The land your ancestors trusted to provide has been replaced by a calendar that never stops asking for more. None of this means you should abandon your life and walk into the wild. You can't, and you wouldn't want to. But it is worth knowing that the restlessness you feel is not a personal failing. It is the residue of a very recent bargain, one your body never fully agreed to. Your ancestors did not have more. They simply needed less, and so they were freer. You wake up when your alarm tells you to, and for the first time, you might understand exactly what it cost you.